All right, so Adam, Donald Trump has complained almost every day about the way he's being treated, that this is not a fair prosecution. He likes to rail against the judge. He likes to rail against other people involved in this. But then again, at least in terms of his requests, he's gotten an awful lot of what he's asked for, including a television set while he's waiting. Have you ever seen another defendant treated this way?
I can't remember seeing a television set provided in any other case, nor can I imagine any of us
Christy,
have.
you're laughing so hard.
Yeah, he has definitely gotten accommodations that other defendants have not had. And I think sitting in this courtroom day in and day out, as I have, you really see this judge has, I think, bent over backwards to be respectful and cordial of this defendant in particular, a guy who's outside his very courtroom railing against the judge. And the judge has exercised such restraint, I think, in how he's responded. Is
that okay if he gets treated maybe a little better than some other defendants might?
I think it was notable.
Or is that unfair to even suggest that?
I think that it was notable when we had the contempt of the gag order, and the judge said, I really don't want to send you to prison. You are potentially the next president of the United States. The judge was taking these factors into consideration, at least in some part. And so whether that's okay or not, I think the key point is that Trump is completely wrong to say that he's been unfairly treated. He's completely wrong to say that the judge is treating him worse than the next defendant.
We've talked a lot, Deanna, about the job that the defense team has in keeping Donald Trump on in a way that is not going to get him into trouble. Let's just put it that way, right? You've had to, and it's not unusual to have to manage a client when you're a defense attorney, but is essentially what the judge is doing in some ways defendant management?
I don't know if I would call it defendant management per se, but I was in the courtroom when he spoke to Donald Trump about the gag order and urged him to not force him to do this, not only for Donald Trump, but also for the court officers that would have to execute this sanction if he put him in. So it's been interesting to see. But the defense attorneys, I mean, the hardest thing for them, I think, is not knowing who's going to testify the next day. And that's Donald Trump created because the judge wouldn't force the prosecutors to tell them.
All right, Vaughn, let's go back to what happened for the majority of the day today, which is the request that came from jurors that they wanted to hear back some of the testimony, but also part of the judge's instructions. What stands out there?
Right. Number one, it comes down to the testimony of David Pecker and Michael Cohen from 2015 and 2016 as it related to what the prosecution has alleged was the beginning of the conspiracy to commit election fraud and to suppress the story of Stormy Daniels. And the testimony, there were four different parts of it. One of them was a phone call between Donald Trump and David Pecker that David Pecker says took place in the summer of 2016 as it related to the potential purchasing of Karen McDougal's story. There was testimony related directly to the August 2015 Trump Tower meeting that Donald Trump had with David Pecker and Michael Cohen. And then there was another phone call over the lifetime rights of Karen McDougal's story and the purchasing of them. And so for the jury, I think it's notable that there was discussion inside of that deliberation room and a desire to have this testimony read back to them because it specifically pertains to the underlying crime that the prosecution has alleged. This is a complex case. Of course, there is the financial, there is the fraudulent business records component of this, but then there is the election fraud part of this. And that is where you see here the jury apparently interested in the internal discussions that were taking place and the extent to which perhaps Donald Trump was the one that was directing these conversations to take place. And now we should also note that as part of this, that there are audio recordings that they have in their possession on this laptop that the jury has in their room. And they had requested this morning the ability to have headphones to be able to more effectively listen to these multiple audio recordings. That can include a September 2016, that audio recording that Michael Cohen says that he recorded of Donald Trump, in which he contends that he was discussing the $150,000 payment to Karen McDougal. But then there's also that phone call between Michael Cohen and Keith Davidson in October of 2017, in which he expressed that Donald Trump had regretted buying Stormy Daniels' story. So again, there is a lot that this jury has to comb through here. And to the extent that they do, we are getting some tidbits of potential interest points for this jury coming out of these notes and these requests directly to Judge Merchan.
So let me ask you, Christy, about one specific portion of the readback, and that is when Pecker was asked about his phone call with Donald Trump. And Pecker said, when I got on the phone, Mr. Trump said to me, I spoke to Michael, presumably, meaning Michael Cohen. Karen is a nice girl. Is it true that a Mexican group is looking to buy her story for $8 million, Donald Trump asks. I said, this is again Pecker, I absolutely don't believe there is a Mexican group out there to buy a story for $8 million. And then he said, what do you think I should do? I said, I think you should buy the story and take it off the market. We should also point out it's been more than a month since they heard this testimony and some other testimony. But does that tell you anything important about where their brains are?
Yes. So this is exactly what the prosecutor, Joshua Steinglass, told them that they should focus on in his closing. He said, there's a lot of documents in this case, a lot of witnesses. Don't lose sight of the significance of this phone call. And so the fact that the jury is now asked to get that testimony read back is, I think, a good thing for the prosecutors because it shows a number of things. One, Donald Trump knew who Karen McDougal was. She's a nice girl. Two, they're talking about whether or not to purchase this story. Remember, that goes back to that Trump Tower meeting that they also wanted to hear about, where the part of the agreement is finding these negative stories from women and killing them. And that, again, to help the campaign. And then the other thing it shows is Trump is deputizing Michael Cohen, right? At the end of that call, according to Pecker, he said, well, you know, I'll have Michael get in touch with you. And that's important because Michael Cohen then follows up with Pecker and they arrange for the AMI to make the payment to Karen McDougal. That's the illegal corporate contribution that would be the unlawful means in this second election law conspiracy crime.
So that I also want to talk about, Adam, the readback of Pecker and Cohen's testimony back to back. It is always interesting when you're at a trial, doing a trial, covering a trial, as we have done, is that, you know, you can't like say, OK, let's do this witness and we're going to talk about this thing and then we're going to have this other witness talk about this thing and go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It doesn't work that way, right? So the jury clearly wanted to look at these two pieces of testimony about the same incident, but they were actually given 3 weeks apart. Do you think it helps one side or the other?
I think it definitely helps the prosecution. This was a relatively long trial. It's gone on, has it been 4 weeks now, at least? And so bringing those two elements of testimony, those two witnesses, as you said, you can't jump back and forth, having them read right next to each other, I think is very powerful for the prosecution here.
Do you think, Deanna, that specific pieces of testimony that we heard read today suggests a kind of roadmap that the jury is following?
I do. And juries are wild cards. You never really know what they're going to do until the end. But if you look at what they asked for, they're starting in 2015 at Trump Tower, which is where the alleged conspiracy began. And then, like you said, they're going into the testimony of both Pecker and Cohen. And the judge instructed them yesterday that for accomplice liability in New York, Michael Cohen's an accomplice, they can't just convict on Michael Cohen's testimony alone. So having David Pecker's testimony as well to align it and make sure that they corroborate each other is a really good sign for the prosecution.